Chapter 10: The Underground Lake. Our wooden-handled grenade is the standard equipment of the infantry, consisting of 3 parts. The upper side is wrapped in iron sheets into a cylindrical shape, and the lower part is a wooden grip. After triggering, the explosives inside are used to stimulate the iron shards to kill the enemy, and the power is not very strong. The big man left one grenade, and I took the other, and seeing that many fireballs were already rushing towards me, I pulled out the fuse and threw the grenade with white smoke emitting from the wooden handle. The grenade exploded into a cloud of white smoke, and a dozen blue fireballs flying in front were hit by the exploding shrapnel and fell to the ground one after another to extinguish, but more fireballs continued to swarm from behind. Luo Ning was in front, and the other 3 people were behind, using the semi-automatic rifles in their hands to fight while retreating, each with more than 20 bullets, and it didn't take 2 minutes to shoot out. If you want to deal with the blue fireballs formed by those strange ladybugs, you can only shoot them with guns, and the slightest contact with them will cause you to burn. A rifle without bullets is not as good as a burning stick. The big man threw away his rifle, pulled out the last grenade, and shouted at me. "Old Hu, it's time, is it neat?" Luo Ning and I supported Gawa. The 4 of us formed a circle, wrapped the grenade in the big man's hand in the middle. I stared at the grenade in front of me. As long as the big man pulled the string, it would be burned in a few seconds, and the last moment finally came. At this time, I don't plan to think too much about other things. One is that those fireballs are getting closer and closer, and I don't have time to think about it. And secondly, because I'm worried that thinking too much about life and death will make me weak. I have always wanted to be a special combat hero like Yang Zhenxi, but I didn't die on the battlefield. But I walked to the end of my life at the bottom of Kunlun Mountain for no reason. I was really unwilling. I put my heart sideways, and I wanted the big man to detonate the grenade. Luo Ning had already closed her eyes tightly and waited for death, but she suddenly thought of something, and suddenly stood up and grabbed us. You hear the sound of this water flowing so loudly. This place is very close to the underground river. Let's jump into the river quickly. Just now, I only cared about shooting, and then I was about to commit suicide with a grenade, and I had already left the matter of the underground river behind, and I didn't hear the rumbling sound of the water in the chaos. And when I heard Luo Ning say this, I thought that there was still a way to live, if we could jump into the river in advance. Although those fireballs were powerful, we couldn't help it. It was too late, but it was too soon. Thousands of blue fireballs were already close at hand, and the 4 survivors were desperate for survival, desperately running towards the roar of the water. Listening to the sound of the water, it was only a dozen meters away. We couldn't run a few steps, and after passing the end of the underground cavity, a large waterfall appeared in front of us, and there was a natural underground lake of considerable scale under the waterfall. I didn't have time to take a closer look. My heart was hot, scratching my heart and scratching my liver. Presumably the fireball had hit my back. As long as it was stained with a small spark, the flames would immediately engulf the whole body. This life and death juncture. Where did I have time to think more? And jumped off the lake with a jump. In the chaos, I saw that the big man and the other 3 people were also burned, and they jumped into the lake one after another screaming. I plunged into the water, and the blue flames on my body were immediately extinguished by the lake. The water and fire did not melt, and the rest of the flying insects seemed to know the power of the lake, and only lingered 2 or 3 meters from the surface of the lake, not daring to rush down and attack. I peeked out of the water to breathe, and found that the big man also came out, but there was no trace of Luo Ning and Gava. I was worried that they didn't know the nature of the water, drowning in the lake. Took a deep breath and prepared to dive into the water again to save them. At this time Luo Ning had already floated up from the lake with Gava. It turned out that Gawa had never swam in her life, and after jumping into the lake, she was choked by the water and fainted. Luo Ning just saw it, so she dived into the lake and rescued him, but fortunately, the drowning time was not long. Gawa coughed a few mouthfuls of water, and came to her senses again. Tibetan customs are not allowed to go down to the lake to bathe and swim, and Galva chatters in her mouth, asking the Buddha to forgive her sins. The sky above the lake was lit up by countless fireballs as bright as day, and the 4 of them gathered together. Although it was early spring, they felt that the groundwater was not cold, but felt a slight warmth on the body, and it was a warm lake formed by geothermal action. The big man scolded, "Mom, the gun is gone, and it has sunk to the bottom of the lake." I reminded him, "We're out of bullets, it's useless to ask for guns, now let's find a way out, you keep your head down, and be careful of the bugs rushing down." The big man didn't believe that those fire-covered insects could rush into the lake, and he grinned widely, and soon his smile froze, and thousands of fireballs glowing blue were gradually gathering, forming a huge flame, and with a snort, he quickly burrowed back into the lake. I took a breath and was about to go down, when I saw Gawa next to me and was stunned. He was naturally afraid of the lake, and he didn't dare to dive into the lake to hide, so I had to force his head into the water, and dragged his arm to swim deeper. The large fireball has a diameter of several tens of meters, and as soon as it touches the surface of the lake, it stimulates the water vapor to steam. Although the fireball was large and the lake was wider, the suicide attacks of the ladybug death squads did not work, and they drowned in the water. The bottom of the lake was originally dim, but it was reflected by the fire above, and it was barely able to see the environment of more than 10 meters below the water, and there were countless big fish swimming slowly in the depths of the water. These fish were completely different from what I had seen before. The big fish had extremely long whiskers, similar to salmon, and because they lived in a dark environment, their eyes had deteriorated, and there were only 2 white spots left. I was startled by the strange appearance of these big fish, ate a few mouthfuls of water, and then saw that Gawa was also kicking his hands and feet, and couldn't hold his breath anymore, and wanted to struggle to swim up to breathe. But the bottom of the lake suddenly darkened, and I estimated that those insects were almost dead, and I pulled Gawa to swim up to the lake. There was a layer of ladybug corpses floating on the surface of the lake. There was no fire, there was a dark patch everywhere, and I shouted to the big man, "Big man, do you still have a flashlight?" The big man replied, "It's all gone, there's nothing left, so let's go in the dark this time." Suddenly, Luoning also came out of the lake, wiped the water on her face with her hand, and held a military crutch flashlight in her other hand. "The last 2 I brought with me have been in my pocket, and didn't fall into the bottom of the lake." Everyone dragged each other and climbed ashore. They all felt tired and hungry, and they no longer had the energy to act, and they had not eaten for more than 10 hours, let alone flesh and blood. Even if they were really beaten with iron, I am afraid that they would not be able to hold on. The big man jumped into the lake again and came back with a bayonet, scraped the scales and cut them into several slices. I tasted it first. The taste of the raw fish meat was okay, not too fishy, but slightly bitter, and I felt very fragrant after chewing a few more bites. Only Gava said that he would not eat in the sky, and the army also had ethnic discipline and was not allowed to eat fish in Tibet. But when I thought that Kunlun Mountain was at the junction of Qinghai and Tibet provinces, we were still on the Qinghai side according to the location, and there were more Hui people in Qinghai than Tibetans, so eating fish here was not considered a violation of discipline. In fact, even if the real offender is disciplined at this time, he can't take care of it, and his eyes are already blue with hunger, so special circumstances can only be treated specially. The 3 of them gobbled up a big fish raw, and felt that there was still a little unfinished, so the big man swam into the lake to touch the fish. Luo Ning checked the wound on Gawa's foot, and I walked around the lake to see if there was any place to go out. The water flow of the waterfall is so large that there should be a place for this lake to diverge. The drop of the waterfall is tens of meters. According to Luo Ning's estimate, the water system in front of us should be an underground tributary of the Brahmaputra River, and there may be volcanoes deep underground, so the lake will be warm. I took Luo Ning's flashlight and found a gap in the underground lake, and the water flowed out of the gap. This waterway was a cave 7 or 8 meters high, and the bottom was completely flooded, and there was no way to go, and if you wanted to move forward, you had to swim out of the water. I went back to Luo Ning and told her what I saw. Luo Ning's map and compass were lost. I can only speculate intuitively. She has been engaged in surveying and mapping for many years, and she has rich experience. She estimates that our location is not far from the unfrozen spring, and the unfrozen spring does not freeze even in the harsh winter, indicating that there is lava underground. The question is where to return to the surface, and it is not a way to walk around underground all the time. And now the feasible solution is only to go along the river, because only where there is a river will it not be a dead end. The big man also came back dejected. He didn't catch a fish this time. We didn't want to stop any longer, so the three water-friendly people put Gava in the middle and swam in the direction of the water towards the far part of the cave. Although the surface of this underground river is not wide, but the undercurrent below is very powerful. By the impact of the current, it is not effortless to half float and half swim, but this tunnel is too long, and the water temperature is much higher than just now, and the smell in the nose is full of sulfur, and in the water, I still feel dry mouth. The big man was a little anxious, and complained while swimming. We may have made the mistake of left-leaning blind activism this time. Why did we swim for so long and still not get to the end? The water in this place is so fast that there is not even a place to stand and breathe. It's better to turn back and swim back. I criticized the big man and said, "What did you do earlier?" They all swam out so far before they asked how long the red flag could last. Is there any doubt that our revolution will be able to achieve a final victory? As soon as you took the first step of the long march, you began to waver? You grit your teeth and hold on. The big man quibbled. How can you say that? Didn't I want to reserve some strength for the revolution? And who is to blame for the losses caused to the revolution by being so blind as you are? Halfway through our words, Luo Ning exclaimed, "Do you see if there are any animals behind you?" "It seems to be. Monster." I also heard an abnormal noise in the water behind me, turned around and shone with a flashlight. The water behind the water was rolling, and a huge black shadow quickly approached from the water. The lighting range of the flashlight was not enough, and I couldn't see what it was. But the one who came was not good, and the good one did not come, so we all pulled out the thorn and concentrated on preparing for war. Chapter 11. The Overlord Salamander. The strength of the undercurrent and undercurrent under the surface of the river became stronger and stronger, and it was impossible to stop, and the body was involuntarily swept forward by the river, and the huge monster behind followed like a shadow. Most of its body is in the water, rolling up waves of splashes. The cave in the river is too dark, only its sound is not visible. Judging from the sound, its body shape is 7 or 8 meters long, to say the least. In the last section of the dark river, the current was even more rapid, and the 4 of us were afraid of being washed away, so we hugged each other tightly and fell into a hole in the river. Below is a huge underground dark river. The water temperature in the river is very high. There are countless tributaries like the same river we just passed, spewing out from the mountain wall, like a large water tap, converging into the main river below. There are many raised stone holes on both sides, constantly emitting white high-temperature gas. Some stone crevices have some dark red flame slurry. It seems that this is probably the underground volcanic belt that Luoning said. The river was so hot that we struggled desperately to climb up a huge rock by the river, and found that even the rock was warm. And because there was a lava fire nearby to illuminate it, I turned off the flashlight to save a little precious battery, and I asked them, "Have you seen clearly? What exactly was it in the back of it?" "It's a big size." The big man and Luo Ning didn't see it clearly, and shook their heads at the same time. Jiewa was the worst. He drank a stomach of river water. His belly was round. He spoke with one mouth, and spit out several mouthfuls of water before he could make a sound. He rubbed his stomach and said, "Oh, see that Jie bear? Follow behind them, and fall into the middle of the river." Just in case, the big man held the military thorn and stood up to check the situation in the nearby river. "What water monster?" "Nothing." After saying that, he turned around and was about to come back, when suddenly a large blood-red tongue stretched out from the river, more than 2 meters long, and in one roll it wrapped around the big man's legs, and threw him to the ground and pulled him into the river. Thanks to Gava's quick eyes, she stabbed the big tongue with her bayonet, and the monster's tongue hurt, and the big man let go, stared at 2 strange eyes like red lights, and crawled out of the river. It looked exactly like the salamander. It had been shot and killed by the big man, with a head like a frog and a body like a skinless crocodile. It's just that this salamander is too big and too big. It is more than 10 meters long, The skin on its body is shining with colorful scales, and the big tail is flicking, and it is extremely vicious and looks at everyone. I hurriedly asked Luo Ning, "Luo Gong, are you sure it doesn't hurt people? Why is this one so big?" Luo Ning's face turned pale, and he trembled and said, I mean the last one. It's just Overlord Salamander, very aggressive. During the Ice Age it's already extinct, and I can't think of it here. No one would have thought that in this special environment of isolation, there would be fierce beasts that had been extinct since ancient times. Underground creatures such as salamanders are cold-blooded animals, and the excessive geothermal heat makes the Overlord Salamander in front of us extremely violent, and Gawa stabbed it in the tongue, and the smell of blood in its mouth made it strongly aggressive, not to mention, the salamander we shot and killed. I don't know if it is its descendant relatives. In short, this beam is knotted, and the two sides have to fight a fish to die in this net. I made a look, the big man and Galva understood, and they outflanked the two sides of the Overlord Salamander, and the three-person battle team formed a flanking attack. The Overlord Salamander screamed, and danced its claws to the three people, and before we could do it, it swept it with a huge tail, and put the GA baby on the ground, rolled up the GA Wa, and opened its bloody mouth to bite. The salamander's mouth originally had no teeth, but this Overlord Salamander's huge mouth has 3 rows of sharp teeth up and down. If it lets it bite, where can there be life? Seeing that the situation was urgent, the big man and I pounced, and the two of us joined forces to break the big mouth of the Overlord Salamander, and we couldn't let it bite down in any way, otherwise Gava's head would be gone. As long as it has nothing to do with religion, Gava immediately became extremely brave, although the tail of the Overlord Salamander was wrapped around the waist down, but the hand did not stop, seeing that this monster had rough skin and thick flesh, and was not afraid of water and fire, so he had to poke it in the mouth with a bayonet. The Overlord Salamander was injured in the mouth, frightened and angry, and used his strange strength to fight his body, and threw the 3 people on his body to the ground. This guy's strength was extremely great. I was thrown by it to a stone, and the blood surged, and the Venus in front of me was chaotic, and the big man fell into the river, but immediately climbed back to the shore, and his whole body was steaming white. And he was scalded by the river and screamed. Trying to fight this huge Overlord Salamander with only 3 bayonets is tantamount to hitting a stone with an egg, and the 4 of them shouted and left together, with the Overlord Salamander in hot pursuit. The ground is full of volcanic rock and ash, and it is soft and slippery to step on, making it difficult to run. In order to get rid of the big monster behind us, we stepped on the volcanic rock by the river valley and climbed up the steep point, and I was halfway up when I heard the big man yelling at me, telling me to be careful. I looked down and saw that the Overlord Salamander was swimming on the mountain wall like a big lizard, trailing me, less than 3 meters away from me, and its long tongue was almost licking my ass. I wanted to jump down to escape, but I climbed too high. I was not sure that I could jump into the river. If I made a slight mistake, I would fall on the stone and it would be miserable. I cursed, and pulled out the bayonet with one free hand, ready to do a trap beast fight. Even if I died, I would pull this monster on the back. The other 3 people also saw that the Overlord Salamander was about to catch up with me, but the slope of the mountain wall was too steep to come over in time to help, so they all gritted their teeth and stared at each other, but they were helpless. Chapter 12 Earthquakes. Luo Ning suddenly thought of something, and leaned on the stone wall and shouted at me. "Comrade Xiaohu, glorious bullet!" The rest of the people thought at the same time, yes, we still have 1 grenade left, which has not been used, and it is now in the arm belt of the big man. The Chinese-made standard wooden handle grenades are waterproof, and some soldiers stationed in Qinghai Lake often use grenades to blow up fish in the lake, although everyone fell into the water just now, but the grenades should not be damp. Thanks to Luo Ning's reminder, the big man took out a grenade. Old Hu catch it. Threw it at me diagonally. I hurriedly put the bayonet in my mouth, copied it with my right hand, caught the grenade, pushed off the safety cover with my thumb, threw away the bayonet with my mouth, bit the pull ring, and the fuse of the grenade was ignited, and white smoke came out. I looked down at the big mouth of the Overlord Salamander, and threw the grenade in, Where did the Overlord Salamander know what the grenade was, and saw the black whirring flying over, according to its usual habit of hunting, swallowed it with a long tongue, and with a muffled sound, the grenade exploded in its mouth, although the skin on the body of the Overlord Salamander was hard. But the skin and flesh in the mouth were very soft, and this time it blew its head from the inside out, fell to the bottom of the stone wall, and the huge body twisted a few times, and died on the rocks by the river with a white belly. I let out a long breath. My whole body was soaked in cold sweat, and I didn't feel scared just now, but at this time, my hands and feet were weak, and I felt dizzy when I looked down. Suddenly, the mountain wall shook violently, and the water of the underground river exploded, and the air was full of the smell of liusu, and waves of heat rushed up from below. The volcano under the riverbed began to move, and the crowd was caught off guard and almost fell. I hurriedly climbed a relatively gentle slope, sat down and took a few breaths, and was shocked, but I saw that the shaking of the ground was becoming more and more violent, and the mountain wall formed by volcanic rock could collapse at any time. Luo Ning said that there is not necessarily a volcanic eruption, depending on the situation, it should only be a periodic activity of the volcano, and the time of this cycle of activity is uncertain. It may occur once every few days, or it may occur only once in hundreds of thousands of years. There are many types of volcanoes. The common inverted horn chimney-shaped volcanoes are formed after large-scale eruptions, and some volcanoes, although not extinct volcanoes, have not erupted for tens of thousands of years, and have been buried deep in the ground, occasionally shaking. But no matter how many years it is active, we're unlucky, just in time. I wanted to look for an exit along the underground river, but the river below was boiling, and if I went down, I had to turn it into dumplings boiled in a pot. A few hundred meters above my head, a slender white light appeared, and my eyes were glazed and my eyes tingled. What was that? Could it be some kind of long-extinct creature? Luo Ning was pleasantly surprised. It's the sky. It's the sky. The shaking of the underground volcano caused an earthquake, and the earth above my head cracked a big crack, and I hadn't seen the sky outside for so long that I almost forgot what the sky was like, whether it was blue or white. I said to the rest, "Comrades, it is really an endless road. Persevering to the end is victory. For the sake of New China, move forward." The four people, who were already exhausted, suddenly saw the hope of escaping, and with infinite strength in the flat ground, they pulled their legs apart, rounded their arms, and desperately climbed up the slope. The vibration below is getting more and more intense, the heat wave is pressing, the strong smell of liufu chokes people's brains. We are worried that the crack will be shaken and closed by the earthquake. Everyone wants to go out as soon as possible, and they all use the momentum of a 100-meter sprint on the steep slope of 45 degrees. The more up the volcanic rock is more and more broken, some are like sand. It is difficult to gain a foothold, climb up 3 feet, and fall back 2 feet. The skin on the hands is worn off, and I don't care about the pain. I clenched my teeth, even kicked and planed, 500 or 600 meters high. It was as difficult as a long march over the snowy mountains. After all, the physical strength was exhausted. And finally returned to the ground, the blue sky and white clouds, the mountains on both sides were undulating. The place where we climbed up was a section of the Kunlun River Valley, and it was also the lowest area in the TianXiaBaChang Plateau, far from the first Daoban. The Frozen Spring military station, only a few kilometers away. Luo Ning's physical strength is not good. Gawa has a foot injury. The two of them fell behind at the last moment. I didn't care about resting, and hurriedly strung the armed belts on the 2 people with the big man, and hung them down for Luo Ning and them to pull. The earthquake became more and more violent, and this crack more than 1 meter wide could collapse at any time. Luo Ning and Gawa could only hold on to the belt tightly, affected by the underground vibration, and slid down a step when they stepped on it, and they couldn't even climb up half an inch. The big man and I used all our strength to pull up, but no matter how strong the 2 of us were, we couldn't pull them up at the same time. At this time, Gawa let go of the strap and held Luo Ning hard underneath, plus we pulled her up from the crack in one fell swoop. When I tried to throw the belt down again to save Gawa, a violent tremor came, and the earth closed together again, and Gawa was squeezed alive in the middle. In the low temperature of -20 degrees, our coats and hats were long gone, and the three of us forgot about the cold, wearing only thin clothes, crying and digging in vain with our hands and bayonets on the sand and gravel on the ground. 3 days later, I was lying on my bed in the hospital of the military region, and the chief of staff of the military region held my hand and cordially expressed his condolences. "Comrade Xiaohu, you have been very brave this time, and on behalf of the Central Military Commission, I would like to express my condolences to you, and I hope that you will recover as soon as possible and make new contributions on the revolutionary road. What do you think? Are you feeling okay now?" I replied, "Thank you for your concern, I still. Also, I want to say it's okay, but when I think of those comrades in arms who will leave me forever, Xiaolan, Gawa, instructor, and second squad leader, the word good is held in my chest, and I can't say it."